This is Josh Belk with the Belk on Business podcast. Over this last week, it's been an eventful last month or so in as far as in my life personally. But last week, about a week ago today, my grandmother passed away, and was given the privilege, the honor to be able to speak at her funeral and deliver the message at her funeral, and was asked by the family to do so. And as I went through and actually had put together an acrostic on the letters of her name. Her name was Cara, C-A-R-A. And as I went through and spent a lot of time being very reflective on what she meant to me and a lot of what I had learned from her. She was a lady who never finished high school. I think she dropped out somewhere 10th grade or so. So not a woman that you would say was educated, not a woman who went into business and built this very successful business. She was very much a mom and a lady who had held various jobs through the years as needed by the family. But I tell you what, this was a lady who I had learned a ton from. And as I went through kind of putting together what I was going to speak about at the funeral, I really began to think about really kind of four different areas that she kind of excelled in. And then kind of going through just putting together the podcast, I'm kind of thinking, you know what, I think I really can take some of these things that I've learned and how you can apply these into business. So this is kind of a more or less a podcast, a little bit selfish here, and taking some of what I've learned from a woman that was very dear to me, and how it can be applied to business. Like I said, her name was Cara, C-A-R-A, and the C really, for me, it was a woman who was very caring. As I think about in business, we really need to have a sense of empathy when working with other people. I was listening to a podcast this last week, and I'm sure many of you are probably familiar with Tom Bilyeu, and he talked about the difference between empathy and sympathy. And he spoke about his wife and someone who obviously he adores very much, and someone who's been a tremendous influence, especially early on in his life, in his career, as he really went through some very difficult times. And in this, he had said that he appreciated the fact that she was empathetic and not sympathetic. Didn't need for her when he had fallen down to get into the dirt with him and cry together and just complain about how bad things were. But really to kind of help pick him up, dust him off, and really just kind of help provide the energy and the encouragement to move forward. As I look at the life of my grandmother, she was that type of a person, a very caring person, not someone who would kind of just wallow in the mud with you, but someone who was very much a person who cared about you as an individual and wanted to see you succeed. And I think in business, we should want this for our employees. We should want this for our clients. We should care, be empathetic, and really do what needs to be done to help them to be able to succeed with the right type of a heart behind it. Secondly, she was a lady who was very authentic. A very opinionated lady, a lady that would be very quick to tell you what she was thinking, but she was authentic. She was true. You knew where she was coming from. You may or may not have agreed with her all the time, but you knew where she was coming from. She had a very strong moral compass. She spoke from a place of her morals and that which she valued in her life. She held a high value to her relationships. And I think that that's something that in business we should value those relationships. There are the relationships we have with the people that work alongside us, the advisors that we bring in, and especially in our clients as well. Are we authentic with them? Are we transparent with them? Are we truthful with them? The R, responsive. And this was a lady who, if we had a need, she was there. She was always present. Even when I used to stay over at her house as a child growing up, she wouldn't come out of the bedroom until she had presented herself well. And then she always was a person who had her hair done. She spent time on. She was presentable. Her face always had makeup on, and always just was there, was present. And she came out purposeful in her relationships. And then as she sit down, whether it was playing a game, whether it was eating a meal, whatever it was that we were doing at that time, she listened purposefully, and then also was very responsive to any needs that you may have. She was always present at graduations and at important events. And as a business owner and in business, are we responsive? Are we responsive to the needs of the people who work for us, who work alongside us? Are we responsive to our customers' needs, or do we just simply are just very do we have a presumptuous type of a relationship? Oh, they're always going to be there. They're going to do what they're supposed to do, or are we responsive? And then lastly, the last day is she was a lady who was very affectionate. When I talk about affection, and I'm going to talk about the physical end necessarily, but what I mean here is just having a very kind and tender approach to life. And of course, as my grandmother and as a boy, I think it was gross. She came in, she kissed me on the cheek or give me a hug, whatever the case may be. But that came with the heart of affection, and always very tender, always very kind. In her later years, her health began to trouble her, and some of that tenderness began to wear off because of the pain that she had to deal with. And but fortunately, so many years where I can look back where she was a very tender and kind-hearted individual, and as we during this time began to think a little bit about the legacy that she left behind, it was really a legacy of these areas. A very caring, authentic, responsive, and affectionate person. And her legacy that she left behind in her children and her grandchildren were of love, of hard work. You won't find a lazy person in the family. A very disciplined family, a very hardworking family, and a very loving family, and a very generous family as well, because she was a very generous lady, always very giving of herself. So in business, we think about this lady. For most of you, some of you would have known this lady. Most of you, and probably a great majority of you, didn't. But a lady who was very caring. A lady who, and we should be this way in our business. We should be caring in our business. We should be empathetic. A lady who was authentic. And we should be very authentic. We should be very transparent. We should be very true to the values and the morals that we hold dear, and to the corporate culture that we built. A lady who is responsive. We should be responsive as employers. We should be responsive to our clients. And then also we should be very affectionate, have a tender heart, be very kind in our approach with the people that partner along with us, whether as employees or as our clientele. Hope this particular podcast did bring you some value. I would encourage you, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the Belk on Business podcast. Once again, this is Josh Belk. Have a wonderful day.